Is the sheep preaching hate when he says, I'm not going to let the wolf eat me anymore? If the wolf comes in here, next time he comes in here, I'll do whatever I have to do to keep him off my back. Is the sheep violent or is the wolf the violent one? He wasn't teaching hate, he was teaching common sense. You know, somebody's knocking you over the head, stop him. Do whatever you have to do to stop him. You know, the ones that were knocking him over the head were afraid of the fact that he might swing back. So they said, no, he's teaching hate, he's violent.
Situation when it came down to Kabeer and Kabeer talking to not only my ex-wife but also my mother, right? He also talked to another young lady. Now when it comes down to him saying that I wasn't there, I was in the audience. I was sitting there watching the interview live. They came to me and asked me if it was okay to speak to not only my ex-wife but also to speak to my mother. And they also asked me if it was okay to speak to this other sister who I was covering at that time, right? Because she was traveling and she came down to the land, right? So I was watching over her and her children. So my thing is this, right? I was in the audience for all three interviews. I sat there and watched it live. I watched it unfold live in color. I had no problems with what they said. They said whatever was on their heart. I was totally fine with whatever they may have said and what they were saying. He said, well, why weren't you sitting there right there with them? Listen, I don't need to be in the camera, in the interview. But I did start thinking about this, right? In the whole Berean Moment situation, right? And I started to think, what was the motive of actually entertaining an interview with my now ex-wife? What was the motive of Kabeer to actually entertain an interview with my mother? Somebody else who's from Michigan, two sisters who are from Michigan. What was the motive behind it? When it simply could have had any sister in the ministry to be able to interview, any brother, any sister to interview, right? For these particular situations. What was the motive behind it? And I started to think even further, right? I started to kind of do a little bit more thinking and investigating because y'all know I like to kind of go deep dive in quite a bit of things. And my thing is this, right? I started to put two and two together. And I already know I'm finna give faking Gates hoe ass a little bit of knowledge to be able to go run his mouth about because he don't got his own testimony. He don't got his own story. He has everybody else's he can talk about. That's the reason why he will never be great. You understand what I'm saying? But my thing is this. I start thinking about it. Y'all. And what I came up with is that there was a particular situation and a particular young lady that was spoken to, right? She was spoken to, or she was spoken about. In fact, Kabeer came to me about this young lady, and she's actually on the first episode of the series. Let me show you guys my screen because this is going to get kind of deep right here, okay? And it's kind of going to give a little bit more of a motive as to why the brother was asking for what he was asking for when it came to Michigan. I guess he didn't want to make it seem like it was odd or a little abnormal to sit down and talk with a particular sister just to get to know her a little bit. You understand what I'm saying? But this sister right here, I remember Kabeer coming up to me, okay, and telling me and mentioning this particular sister, and I'm gonna show you who she is right now. This sister right here, and I remember his comments was a bit eerie. It was a bit like I was kind of like clenching my invisible pearls. You understand what I'm saying? Like, oh, whoa, wait a minute, she's married. You understand what I'm saying? So why would you speak about that like that about a married woman? He came to me and inquired about this sister right here that I'm about to show you, okay? And she's on the first episode of Berean Moment. He was interested in her in a, I guess, stance points of marriage. He asked about this sister, knowing that she was under my leadership, knowing she was under my covering, okay? And was just inquiring if she was what her status was. And I told him she was married. His response was, because man, I would proceeding to say things that were a little bit more vulgar, like as far as what he would want to do to pursue her. You understand what I'm saying? Now, that's what really got my gears turning. Why would you want to interview more saints or more sisters, right? Specifically women from Michigan, right? Why would you want to interview them if you didn't have a game plan or a motive, right, for a particular sister that you showed interest in? And that's what led me to believe that Kabeer himself had interest in this young lady. And instead of making it seem suspicious, he decided to interview more than just one woman, right, from Michigan. Because if he enjoyed the conversation between her, right, they can devise a plan to separate this woman from her husband. You understand what I'm saying? Devise a plan. Now, when I say devise a plan, there was more than one individual who was in on these particular stream of interviews or string of interviews. You understand what I'm saying? In fact, Sister Ashley was one of the individuals who came to my mother and asked her if she wanted to interview with Kabeer Gbaja Biamila on the Berean Moment. Now, why would you have new sisters, brand new to the faith, be introduced on the Berean Moment, right? Talking and asking them and interviewing them, right? Asking questions. Why would you do that? Why would you want to introduce her, especially after you just marked her, right? And you had to apologize to her privately, not publicly. You apologize to her privately for doing that, for marking her, for doing what you did based on her calling out what the truth was on that Marco Polo group. Then you come apologizing to her, ask her if she wants to be on a Berean Moment like you're doing her a favor. What was the real motive behind that? My gears start turning, right? That he made comments and mentions about this particular sister who was married at the time. And I had to defend this sister because it seemed like he was being a little too aggressive. You understand what I'm saying? And inquiring about this sister and what her status is. You understand what I mean? We're going to take a look at who this sister is. And she's the very first episode in the Berean Moment. She's the very first interview, the very first sit down. And my thing is that to line up Michigan sisters, right, who are fresh and new in the saint in the ministry, seemed like it was a cover up. It was just a strategy or a ploy to cover up the fact that he was trying to get to know this sister that you're about to see right here. He was trying to get to know her personally. And then that's what I honestly, faking Gates with your whole ass. That's what you got me really thinking about. You know what I mean? That's what you really got me thinking about. And I hope you use that part in the clip, faking Gates with your whole. I hope you use that part in the clip too, whenever you use it, and you sit here and biting off of my work, right? When you're biting off of my work that I'm feeding your whole ass with, right? When you're biting off my work and you want to disrespect me, make sure you use those clips too, where I'm disrespecting your whole ass. You understand what I'm saying? When I'm bringing out the truth and I'm providing receipts and evidence, this was the very first interview that took place. Let's go ahead and play this, y'all.
When I turned 18, that's when I made my own choice to start attending church, Christianity.
Oh, so you did on your own?
I did,
okay.
Yes, sir.
Mm-hmm. What church you go to in that one? Were you faithful, or is just you just did because it was a friend who was doing it?
I did. It was a big church. It was like a mega church, at least where I live at. Okay. But looking back at where I was during that time, being 18, 19, 20 years old, it was almost as if I was trying to find something to justify drinking, going to the club. It's like, hey, hallelujah, but at least I made it here on Sunday, if you know what I mean. So I would go pretty much almost every Sunday, but sometimes I would be like hungover or so I can't really say it was even because I wanted to have a relationship with God. It was more just finding that being justified for the actions that I did the night before or, you know.
So you went to church when you was at your dad's house. Did you go to church or you guys didn't go to church? You say you stopped going to church. What age?
We stopped going to church, maybe elementary school. So
what'd you do from elementary to 18?
We just didn't attend church. I mean, my dad was always firm on telling me about God, but we didn't fellowship. You know, my grandparents did, but as far as my dad, who I lived with, we didn't really attend church, or I knew the stories in the Bible, Adam and Eve, and, you know, but was never more into depth about it. It was just more of, oh, these are, animals were on the ship, on the boat, and so on and so forth.
So where's mom? Where's mom in this picture?
She's in the picture, but only every other weekend.
Okay.
And supposed to every Wednesday, but she didn't take us on Wednesdays.
So your dad was your main.
He
All right, so pause. Y'all see this, right? Y'all see her. I want y'all to take a good look at her face, her features. Take a good look at her. Remember the questions that he was asking her. Very penetrating questions, personal questions. So your father, well, what was this? What was that? Really trying to entreat her and get to know her a little bit more on a personal level. You understand what I'm saying? Now I'm starting to really question, was the interview with not only Lauren, but also my mother, Sister Shay, was that genuinely what he wanted to do? Or was he trying to cover up an opportunity to get to know this young lady because she was already married? She already had a husband. He was having an opportunity to have a conversation to court this young lady or to see who she was, to do some investigation, to see if it was worth actually taking her from her husband. Now, I want to show you guys a picture. Click this face right here. Have a mental note right real quick of this sister right here. Right? Keep that mental note, y'all. Keep that mental note. Okay? Keep the mental note. Now, I want to show you guys this. That is Kabeer Gbaja Biamila's ex-wife, Elena. Do they not look exactly alike? Do they not look very similar to each other? Is this not his type? I'm just trying to validate my claims here. I'm just trying to really support it and back it up. Not to say that I'm speculating or telling lies, but the brother came to me personally. He talked about some things in regards to having interest of that young lady. And now it's really got me thinking that maybe he was trying to devise a plan to separate this young lady from her husband because he was interested in her. Not only did she look like his ex-wife, but she was young. You understand what I'm saying? And he didn't mind that she had a couple children. And I'm wondering if he ignored the fact that she was already married. Now, I got a lot of questions because Eileen looks just like Sister Marissa. They look just alike. So I'm very curious. What would you guys think? Do you guys think that this was a ploy? This was a smokescreen to be able to get at this sister right here, to get to know her, because she reminded him of Eileen, right? They bear striking resemblance to each other. They both look exactly alike. And if that's the case, how sinister is that? Of a plot to organize these Berean Moment interviews. And the first interview is a woman who looked just like his ex-wife, somebody who he expressed interest in. Now, this young lady left the ministry before he had an opportunity to get his teeth sunk into her. You understand what I'm saying? But it really explains the cover up. If you're interviewing a couple more sisters from the same region who are new, then it doesn't seem suspicious at all that you just want to interview this young lady by herself. Now, I was in the audience. I was watching this interview as well. I wasn't going to allow these young ladies or these women to interview with Kabeer by themselves and alone. I know better than that as a man. You understand what I'm saying? And it wouldn't going to sit well with me for them to be alone. You understand what I'm saying? So I was in the audience the whole time. I witnessed the whole thing. I watched the whole production. You understand? Brother D. Jerry was the one who was working the cameras, right? And I understood exactly what was going on. They asked me for permission, and I gave them permission to interview. So I don't understand why he says, well, you don't know this and don't know that. No, I was sitting right there. And then not only that, they were sitting so far apart from each other that you think that they would be. No, they were not close. They were far apart. And when you go into this tabernacle, the first thing you do is take your shoes off. So while he's sitting here running his mouth about, oh, their shoes are off. Their shoes are off. Look at the intimacy. While he's sitting here running his mouth about these people's shoes being off, that's what you do out of respect. When you enter into that tabernacle, I had my shoes off. Was I trying to sit there and, like everybody had their shoes off? The cameraman, DJ, he had his shoes off. Was he trying to, like, what's up? You take your shoes off out of respect when you enter into the tabernacle. I wouldn't think that you would know anything about respect, the way that you want to talk about men's mothers just to try to get at them, the way that you speak about another man's mother. You understand what I'm saying? I wouldn't think you know respect. In fact, I believe that your mother, your own mother, would be very disgraced of you. She would be embarrassed of who you become, to sit there and speak about another man's mother like that, and to speak on another man's private situation like that. I'm not too crazy. I don't really care about you speaking on my private, but you speaking about my mother in a derogatory way. I don't believe that your mother will respect that you're doing that. I don't talk about men's mothers. I know where to draw the line. You understand what I'm saying? But my thing is this, right? I'm making and piecing this together. This sister looks just like Eileen. This sister looks just like Eileen. And he had expressed interest in this young lady when he approached me and trying to inquire about her. Was he actually actively plotting to take this young lady from her husband? I'm going to say, yeah. I believe that he was. I believe that Kabeer was plotting. I believe that he did not have purity in his heart when he sat her down with that first interview to interview this young lady. I don't think he was pure. I believe that he had bad intentions. I believe he set her down to get to know her. You understand what I'm saying? Because look at Eileen. Look at her. Put it in the chat. Please drop a ram or a sheep in the chat room for me right now, please. If she does not bear a striking resemblance to Kabeer Gbaja Biamila's ex-wife, put it in the chat. If she's a striking resemblance, if she looks just like Eileen, put a ram and a sheep in the chat. For all my righteous alpha men, drop a ram in the chat. All my elegant women who's exceptional, drop a sheep in the chat. Am I just reaching? Or does she look just like her? Do they look just alike? I want to know. Do they look just alike? I want to know. Because my thing is this, right? This is what makes more sense to me when it comes to the situation. And we have now Sister Marissa, an opportunity to get to know this sister under the radar, to get to know who she is, to see if she's a fit for his household, under the radar, without being any speculation, without any, man, that seems kind of weird. Why would he want to interview this brand new sister, right, in the ministry that looks just like his wife, and not want to interview anybody else as a ploy to try to cover up what who he was truly interested in, which is this young lady right here, and just having a conversation to get to know her. So my thing is this, right? Way it's orchestrated, the way it's set up, it just seems like it's too fishy. It's too much of a coincidence for me to be able to pass up. That's what I thank you for, faking Gates, with your whole ass. I thank you for allowing me to think on that level. Like, what's the real thing that goes on with this Berean Moment? What's really happening here? The first 3 interviews are Michigan Saints, Michigan sisters who are brand new, fresh in the ministry, fresh in the ministry, and also not only fresh in the ministry, but they don't know much. But one of the sisters, this one right here, Sister Marissa, looked just like his ex-wife, and it was an opportunity to get to know her better. Even though I told his ass that she was married. She was a married sister. Now I'm in the audience the whole time. Let me make it very clear. Because some people will tell you, will swear something totally different. Why would you let your wife be in the room with a man alone? Don't know shit. But this is what I'm talking about with your lies, faking Gates. When you start lying, when you start bearing false witness, when you start being a clown show and not telling facts and the truth, when you start being immature, right, and butthurt, you understand what I'm saying? Because you're getting your ass handed to you, and there was no way you can move because everything you were saying was trash. None of it made sense. You understand what I'm saying? This is why you got to start asking more questions, because I'm sitting in the audience the whole time watching. Let's continue to hear what other questions Kabeer was asking. Let's go.
He was everything. He had to be a mother to me. And, you know, when people talk about their parents,
I think Lisa D says they favor, but they don't look just alike. Okay, I'm gonna do this mental note her features real quick. Now let me go back real quick. Okay, mental note her features. I'll give you a minute because they look just alike. I'm sorry, sister. I know she just don't got her hair down. You understand what I'm saying? But bless you. They look just alike. Now I'm going to go and I'm going to pan over to Eileen. Okay, you did that mental notation. I'm going to pan over to Eileen, and you tell me now, ain't that not the same person? They look just alike, yo. I'm sorry. They look just alike. I'm sorry. There's no way. I understand. I hear you. But okay, we'll agree to disagree, if anything. But they look just alike. She's just a younger version. She's just a younger version of Eileen. They favor each other a lot, if anything. They're very close, and I see why he was targeting her for the interview very first, because he was on a mission. You understand what I'm saying? Yeah, they favor each other. Let's go.
I always talk about my dad because he was my parent. I didn't have really parents. I had my father, and
just listen to the questions he's asking her.
Sometimes I was so used to having hamburger helper, mashed potatoes, because that was all he had time for. So I had to learn real quick on how to do dishes at a young age, how to clean up when my dad was working. I know sometimes even when I got $5 for doing like chores at my grandparents, $5 is a lot when you're a child, you know? And I would sneak into my dad's wallet because I knew he worked so hard and struggled at times, you know? So I give a lot of my love to the father of how I love my earthly father, if that makes sense, because he took care of me my whole life, and he still does.
Did you grow up in the state?
In Michigan? Yes, sir.
Michigan, okay. You grew up in Michigan, okay. All your life?
All my life.
All your life. You said basically you went from going to church all the way to your elementary, you stopped going to church, and you just lived life. Your dad kind of told you about, you know, God, the Noah's Ark, and animals, Adam and Eve, and just the basics and stuff. So how would you describe yourself as a child?
I was very obedient.
Okay. Okay. It's like your dad. Okay.
No daughter wants to disappoint her father. And all I knew was my father. So when it came to my father, I never argued with him. I never talked back to him. He gave me a curfew. Even if I was 20 years old, I would make sure to be home at that time. So I was very obedient. Obviously, there's times when I chose not to be, but it wasn't very many times, and I learned very quickly. I mean, I was in sports a lot, stayed busy, you know, I was in band. So, I mean, I can't say I really even had time to get in trouble.
What type of sports do you play?
Basketball.
Basketball, what position?
Shooting guard or point.
Can you still play?
I can still play. I was shooting hoops yesterday.
Okay, with you then. But okay, so what did you do at 18?
At 18, I went to a community college, part-time, and then I worked full-time.
Okay.
But at that point, it was just, I didn't really know what I wanted to go to school for after a couple of years. So I just ended up working full-time and then just giving, going to school a break. And so that was kind of that. I haven't gone to school since then, but I have some college, you know, basics.
So how did you meet your husband?
At work.
Oh, okay.
When I was working full-time.
Okay. So can you tell me how you guys met?
Yeah, well, I had a basketball.
Was he your boss? And then, you know, you have guys you doing now.
We worked on opposite lines from each other, so we were back.
What kind of work do you do? Can I?
We made car mirrors.
Okay.
So he was there for about a year before I had started working there, and I had a Knicks shirt on, and that started conversation. And he plays basketball too, so when you have two people that, you know, enjoy the same sport, there's a lot to talk about. So that was a conversation starter, and working together, seeing each other every day. You know, we just hit it off. We clicked right off the bat. I can't say I really liked him at first, and he can vouch for that. I was more standoffish just because.
I mean, let me say this, right? He says she still has a training ball. Y'all dudes are crazy. Nah, Kabeer is a wild boy. Let's make that very clear, okay? Brother for life. I mean, because he's interested. He's a big dude. And this was a little petite little thing. Like she was like 5'1", maybe 5 foot, like little, like 110 pounds. And he's like 6'4", 250. Like, you know what I mean? So I thought that was kind of odd, but he was attracted to her. Let's continue.
He's opposite of me. I'm more quiet, reserved. He's more outgoing. I'm sure a lot of the other brothers can say that too. We're opposites, but we get along very well.
So did you ever see the movie Love and Basketball? Was it
I know that by heart, all those words.
So was it like that? You guys played and you know?
We played together, but I can't say it was all perfect like that.
I don't know that whole perfect. But that's the first thing I was just thinking of, Love and Basketball. So, okay, so now you guys meet. And so now, were you still going to church now, being married? And
We did. But it was more of finding truth in the church at this point. After we got married, and I had gotten pregnant, it was almost like we had to, it was more of my husband. And this is a lot of where I realized how wicked I was as a woman. When I look back at it now, during the time, I didn't think anything of it. But he was the one that, you know, when I got pregnant, what kind of birth do you want to do? And my answer would be, well, obviously in the hospital. Like, you know, that's all I know. Or when it came to other things like vaccinations, we actually had to sit down and talk about it. And lots of times when he would bring up issues like that, what I had to say was so short, and what he had to say made complete sense to me. And it just made my mind completely turn around on things, you know. And I thank the Father for that. You know, I had both of my girls naturally with a midwife. And the Sabbath day, we actually attended the Seventh-day Adventist church for about a year until we just realized there's no life in the church. We couldn't even clap. And when I asked the pastor's wife why, she said because it's secular. And that just blew my mind because, I mean, in the Bible, you know, people played drums, they clapped, they shouted to ya, and here we are just, amen, amen. Even when people got baptized, amen. That was it. There is no life in the church. But the Sabbath day we kept, and that was a big eye-opener for us. We've gone to Pentecostal churches, Wesleyan church, lots of different churches, trying to find our home, but nowhere, we felt like an outcast. It was just half truth or nothing, you know, no truth at all.
Okay, so you guys are just basically looking for truth.
Truth.
So who discovered Straitway truth?
My husband.
So he discovered. So
yes, sir.
How did he discover it? Can you share?
I mean, basically on YouTube. It was more of a search for.
So at the time her husband wasn't there, he was back at the house. I actually picked him up and transported him to one of the feast days or whatever, and he was totally fine with me doing that because he trusted me in that way. But I was in the front row watching this whole interview unfold. I was not going to leave his wife alone with another man. His own wife, I wasn't going to leave alone with another man. I don't give a shit who the man was. It just is what it is. Now she's going through this whole spew, and he's just investigating their relationship, investigating the relationship between him, between her and her family, between her and her husband. And this is kind of what investigations look like. You're going to run and ask questions to really see how she's speaking about the man, her husband. How's she speaking about him? Is he speaking about him in a positive way? Is she speaking about him in a negative way? Is she talking about him in a way as to where it could be compromised? What way can I be able to get in there and infiltrate this marriage, right? To be able to get this sister on my property. You understand what I'm saying? And that's what it is. That's what it started to appear to be. But we're going to continue on and listen in as to what he had to say and questions he's asking. Let's go.
Trying to find a role of a man, a role of a husband, and he was searching for. And he grew up opposite than I did. He didn't have his father. He had his mother. So, you know, I'm sure a lot of men can relate where it's like, who do you look up to when you don't have a father figure? And Pastor Dow speaks a lot of truth on that. So That was a very big thing, and him just finding truth in everything he said, as well as everything else biblically.
So he grew up with his mom.
Yes, sir.
Dad's not a picture. So Pastor Dell was like a father. I mean, kind of talking from a man's perspective.
Yes,
learn how
sir.
to be a man. That's interesting. So now he finds Pastor Dow. He brings it to you, right? I mean, just like most men, I know what that feels like. He brings it to you, and I'm assuming you were like, yeah, this is it. How did you react?
I was just more on the page, okay, like I've heard this before, you know, maybe not for my husband, but, you know, people when they go to church, they say, oh, you got to come here. Like this pastor speaks so much truth. And I just never found that, you know. So when it came to Pastor Dow, I'm just more or less like, okay, this is just another false pastor. But one of the first things I did was I Googled him, and then you hear all these things about him.
What are those things? What you hear about him?
Being a cult leader, and they live in such horrible conditions and stuff like that. But, you know, I was a little hesitated, but I know a lot of times that you have to see for.
Now, you just saw that camera that just rolled by, right? That was DJ rolling the camera. He didn't go too far off to the right because I was sitting right behind Kabeer. I was literally sitting in the front row right behind the brother. You understand what I'm saying? In the front row. So he didn't want to go too far because he just showed me in the shot. And it kind of broke the whole situation, right? It broke the illusion, right? That they are alone. You understand what I'm saying? But when you're a good cameraman, right, and you got skills, this is how you shoot. You shoot like you're not even present, and you shoot like there's no one else in the room. So DJ is really skilled with his camera work. He's a very skilled editor. He's skilled with his camera work, and he understands how to not put other people in the shot. In fact, myself, my mother, and Lauren was all in the audience at that time. Not only were they in the audience, but I believe my son and my daughter also. Now, my son, honestly, based on my guidance, based on my leadership, he was very well behaved. If I asked him to sit quietly, he will sit there for hours and he'll be fine, totally content. But that's just how I brought him up. And from a young age, you understand, I brought him up and he was helping separate clothes and laundry. At the age of 1, he was separating clothes. He was separating laundry. He was helping bring in groceries. He was helping with cleaning, things like that. He was building character for the young man. At the age of 1, he was doing all of this. In fact, he understood how to be obedient to whatever I said. I didn't have to yell at him. I could just look at him and he would stop what he was doing. But that's how I do. That's the way that I poured into my son. I was there for him every waking moment. And that's just kind of what it is. You understand what I'm saying? They don't want to talk about that. They don't want to talk about how great of a father I am to my children. They want to talk about the problems or complications that everybody goes through. A lot of people go through the same complications, if not the very same or similar, and they have to forcefully do something about it, right? They don't want to talk about the level of greatness that you poured into your children, though. They don't want to talk about that. They don't give you the clicks. They don't give you the views. But we were right there. So I just wanted to point that out. Let's go ahead. Let's continue, y'all.
But I know a lot of times that you have to see for yourself, you know? So that was kind of the deal with me. And I didn't, when my husband was telling me about Pastor Dow, I didn't right away go to YouTube and be like, click, click. I didn't do that. I was just like, okay. But I would hear my husband listening to him on YouTube. And whether he'd be in the kitchen or we'd be in the same room, my ears would always hear it. I could be watching TV, I could be playing with the children, and no matter what I was doing, my ears would always hear every single time. And sometimes I would shake my head because I'd be like, that's pretty out there, you know, but I would still listen. Something just always kept me listening. And I never told my husband or went up to him. It was like, hey, can I watch this with you? It was never like that. So after a few weeks, I was really compelled in my spirit just to watch for myself. And after watching the first video, I just kept on watching and watching. Some videos it would take me a while to finish because I would always go back and read. Is he telling the truth? Go back to the Greek. Is he telling the truth? What is he saying? What is behind this word? Everything. And I could never one time find anything that he said that contradicted God's word.
So how did, now I remember meeting you at Walmart, that's the first time I met you, Sister Marissa. What you said something interesting that.
Now, I want to stop it right there. He said, me meeting you at Walmart. That's the first time I met you. And I want you to take a look at his face here as he says that.
How did, now I remember meeting you at Walmart, that's the first time I met you, Sister Marissa.
You tell me that's not a look of a man who's interested in a woman, who's not looking to, I mean, you tell me that, because the way he's smirking, the way he's smiling, he knows she's married. And then reminiscing on the first time he met her, and then the way that he's Sister Marissa, saying her name in a way, it just really pulls out a more of an intimate type of conversation or dialogue. It pulls out a more intimate level. You understand what I'm saying? Let's continue.
You said something interesting that Pastor Dow talked about polygyny.
Yes, sir.
How now most women, when they hear about polygyny, they run the other way.
Yes, sir.
I mean, you got people divorcing their husband or leaving them. How did you react? I mean, how did that make you feel?
I think.
So he asked her a question on polygyny. How does it make you feel to be a sister wife? And what type of question is that in regards to a woman? What do you need to learn more about that in regards to a woman who's new in the faith? Are you trying to learn that for yourself and to understanding how she may be received in your household? To how much kickback or pushback will she give you? Are you asking her these stream of questions as far as how she came into faith, when she was introduced to Dow? What was her experience? Because you don't want the same situation with Eileen, because you want a different type of situation. You want it to be more receptive, right? So you want to see what her viewpoints is, her mindset, and where she's at on these heavy topics. You're not going to be able to get to what he wants 92 children. You're not going to be able to get there with a woman who disagrees with the position of polygyny. So why not ask her the question in your sit down and getting to know her, getting to know the relationship between her and her husband and how close they may be, right? Getting to know the relationship between her and her husband, not only her and her husband, but also her family. And if she agrees with the viewpoints with Dow, how easy and receptive would it be to bring her into your home? I see nothing but that right now. I hear nothing but that right now. These are all penetrating questions to be able to get to know this sister, not to try to ask her these questions because these are topics that people really need. You need to know it, Kabeer, because you're interested. This is the very first episode, the very first interview. I accept my role as a woman, is what you titled it as. And you're showing her great disdain and honestly favor in this video. I remember when I met you, Sister Marissa, at Walmart, and smirking in regards to that. Like you're reminiscing on an experience. You understand what I'm saying? This sister went nowhere alone. You understand what I mean? Nowhere alone. But this is what it screams to me. You understand what I'm saying? Let's continue.
I think I was just more of the fact trying to figure out, why did it ever get to a point where men stopped having more than one wife if mostly all the patriarchs had more than one wife? Where did it ever say?
Ding, 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 ding. That is the golden ticket. That's what you want to know. Does she agree? Does he disagree? No one's worried about it. I'm Kabeer Gbaja Biamila, ex-Super Bowl Hall of Fame. I can influence this young lady to want to lead her husband. Not only that, the father figure in his life now, right? The one he looks for male guidance in Dow can influence him, can be able to get them separated, as he's done multiple times, many times. But that's what he needed to hear. If all the patriarchs had multiple wives, that's it. And her stance on it, is she in agreement? Let's continue. Let's continue, y'all. Let's continue, because this is crazy.
That this is not biblical. And like I said, I'm always seeking for truth, and a lot of things that these churches teach you are false. So in my mind, I wasn't in the mindset of having envy or jealousy. I was just searching for truth. And in that truth, I learned a lot of how to be a woman. If I can spiritually mature myself to the mindset of a woman that might have a husband that has more than one wife, then I should do that, because it takes lots of strength spiritually to see your husband with another woman. It takes a lot of strength mentally, to see your husband with another woman. And
All right. So he's asking, brother Odell, that's a great question, brother. And I believe I can answer that better for you. Now, her husband was not there with us because he entrusted me to take her and her two children, her daughters. He entrusted me to take them down to the land because they really wanted to go down there for the feast day. Now, I have reasons to believe that her husband also was stepping out on her, was actively cheating on her because he wasn't very honest or forthcoming that he was dealing with other women. But I believe that he may have been doing that while they were on the land. Okay. I have reason to believe it. Is it actual factual truth? Just based on conversations, I believe that that's what may have been taking place. But, I can only say that because of conversations. You understand what I'm saying? It was an opportunity to be able to get them somewhere where he can be able to have the house to himself. So, that not only that, but it's the thing is to where I believe he left the ministry, right? He disagreed with some points of doctrine. And I believe it was a little premature because we were developing a really strong bond relationship. I actually baptized the brother, right? And I believe he kind of left prematurely, in which that's something different, right? He had to kind of come back into his own, and when it came to being with the brethren, you know what I mean, being in a brotherhood, he received some deliverance over in Indiana at Straitway. With myself and Muir performed deliverance on the brother. It was just randomly one night, and he started to manifest, and we had to call out demonic spirits, and we started to cast him out of this brother. Great brother. I can tell you his character. He was a very nice guy, very exceptional man. You understand what I'm saying? I thought that his level of being inviting, right, and being relatable was something that was great. He has some great characteristics about himself. One thing that really haunted him is that he thought that that him growing up without his father would mark him and slate him for hell, because he would be considered to be what they would call a bastard. And so he would say that he would hold himself to the Old Testament and saying that, of course, his fate would be that of what a bastard would be, and it talks about in the scriptures, and which I totally disagree with. And I think that that's where our disagreements was, because I believe he definitely deserves salvation through repentance, and which he didn't believe because he was more sticking to that Old Testament doctrine. So that's the reason why. That's a longer answer as to what your question is. I took them down with me. I went and picked them up, and we traveled there and traveled back. You understand what I'm saying? Let's continue.
And you learn a lot about yourself, but your role as a woman, and your husband's role, which is to provide for you. You hear women getting divorces over, oh, he didn't cuddle with me, or he didn't buy me gifts on Valentine's Day, or he missed my birthday. My husband on Mother's Day, he was just like, he came into the room, he's like, hey, it's Mother's Day, right? I was like, yeah. He's like, do you care? I was like, no. And I just went about my day. But other women, it would be a huge deal. So it's getting out of this mindset as a woman of being selfish. Men and women are designed completely different. And I think once women really search that out in the scriptures and seek wisdom, and I learned a lot of wisdom from Mother Carol, and she's a beautiful woman. I just met her yesterday, and she's so humble. You learn a lot about yourself, and you gain peace, so much peace. And I wasn't always in this mindset. So don't get me wrong, because it took a lot of patience, I'm still a work in progress, but I've learned to come to peace with the way that Yah has designed a woman to be for her husband, which is a helpmeet, not a nagger or, so bossing him around and so on and so forth.
Before Straitway, did you used to boss your husband around? I mean, were you that empowered woman they say,
I was more of an instigator.
Y'all hear that door back there in the back? That's people inside of the tabernacle. And those people were myself, my mother, Lauren, DeJerry was one of them, as well as I believe one of the deacons that's up there in Praise Land. He was also one of the cameramen. That's what you're hearing. You're not hearing an empty room. You're hearing people moving around back there. Let's go.
I was more concentrated on what he was doing, what he wasn't doing, and I would make that aware to him. You shouldn't be doing this. You said you'd be home at this time. Looking at his Facebook, stuff like that. And I wasn't really more.
As you can hear, it was a level of trust. She had an issue with trust because the brother would step out on her. And that's the reason why I say what I say in regards to why wasn't he there. I have reasons to believe that based on conversation. Let's go ahead.
Getting into arguments with him, but how I presented myself to him was I would distance myself from him. I would be quiet, give him short answers. So it's more like body language, if that makes sense. So I definitely wasn't acting righteously.
So basically, you now that you know how life looked like before and now after, do you like the way? Oh,
hallelujah, yes.
Now, your husband, is he in the faith right now?
Not fellowshipping or anything.
Okay, but he discovered it.
Yes, sir.
He's okay with you being in the faith.
Yes,
okay.
Sir.
Now you just came. This is your first time here, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Before you met Pastor Dow, before you actually came here, what did you think it would be like? And was it like what you thought it would be, or was it different? Please explain.
It was very different. When I first started watching him, he came off to me as very arrogant, I'm trying to think of the word, like when someone has like a lot of confidence in themselves, but it's not a good confidence. What's the word I'm trying to think of?
Cocky.
There you go.
Oh yeah, well, you haven't have an issue with raising her children. That's not a problem. He got deep pockets, so that's not a problem for him. He wouldn't mind the raising of her children as well if he wants her. But let's continue.
Cocky, prideful. That's how he came off to me when I first started watching his videos. But the more I started watching and the more truth that I had seen and come to, I just came to the realization that this is his love for Yah. This isn't his pridefulness. This isn't him being cocky. He has so much love for the Father. He's going to stand firm and tell you how it is, not because of his own opinions or anything like that. He's just going to tell you how it is. And that was, again, thinking outside the box, not thinking.
Let me say this, because I disagree with this statement right here. This is a beautiful sister. She was inside and out, very humble, very meek. I believe she was a beautiful young lady. I'm not going to say that, beauty's an eye of beholder. She was a beautiful young lady. You understand what I'm saying? And I'm not going to allow her to be disrespected in any way. It was an honor to be able to have met her and her husband. And I say it with all due respect to her husband or whoever she's currently married to now, that this is a beautiful young lady. It's a beautiful sister. She was very meek, very humble, and a very genuine person. I haven't met anybody else. She was genuine. So I got to disagree with that statement right there. You just got to understand certain situations, right? This is not one of those, right? If you're looking on outward appearance, it is in the eye of the beholder. However, I'm making that very known, very clear. Okay. But bless you. Thou's 3 others' wives can't touch the sisters like Mother Carol. Make it make sense. Yeah, let's go.
That this is just a regular man on the street. And that was a really big thing that brought me to the truth too, was because if Yah's going to send us pastors after his own heart, why would it be all these other pastors that teach something different? There has to be a pastor out there that really is truthfully after Yah.
Now, what I'm going to say is this, right? Because we got to move on to the next segment. We're already 2 hours in. We got to move on to the last topic of the day, the main topic here. And I want to tell you and oblige you, go watch the whole interview. Go listen to the questions that were being asked. Listen to the questions. Listen to what was being said. And, you make your own decision determination. Was he actually interviewing this woman, or was he interviewing her for a different position? Maybe he wanted her to be a part of his household. And these questions that he was asking were very penetrating questions in regards to her personal life, her life with her family and her husband, and also with the ministry. Being sure that this right here will be a well-receptive woman for him to be able to have interest in. And was the plot or the desire to separate this woman because she favored, right, Eileen, right? Because she favored Eileen, his ex-wife. Was the plot to separate them so he can be able to get someone who favored his wife, who may have looked similar to his wife, into his household, because he knew that she was married. I told him before they interviewed. This was the very first interview. He was itching to get to know this sister. He was itching to sit down, right? He was itching to do it. And now that I look back on it in hindsight, the other two interviews that followed up, which is Lauren and also my mother, Mama Shay, those two interviews were conducted just to cover up the fact that he was trying to get to know that one sister. It wasn't because of anything other than that. He just didn't want to seem suspicious. He didn't seem odd. Like, why do you want to talk to this sister so badly? And then you make mention of your interests when you come to me and inquire about that young lady. Now, I'm going to now start seeing thumbnails with this young lady's face on it. And I want to say that anything that they were to say to try to deride, to bring that young lady down, to insult her, to make it seem like that these women are out sleeping with all the men in the ministry of Straitway, all of that shit is lies. I condemn every bit of it. And no, there's not the men in Straitway who are horn dogs like that, right? Now, they try to go with a certain structure, but I'm gonna tell you this much: women ain't whores, and the women don't go out sleeping around with the men, gallivanting abroad. Now, there's a level of finesse that does take place, and I believe that young lady was trying to finesse her away from her husband. I believe so, just based on the actions, based on what was said, and piecing everything together now after I've done my thorough investigations on the matter or on the situation. I have now came to the conclusion that that's exactly what he was doing. He was actively working to finesse this sister Marissa, away from her husband and into his bed, into his home. Now, not to just sleep with her, but just to marry her. You understand what I'm saying? To keep her. Now, that's the thing, because the way that it's being painted, it's almost as though they're just hopping around. You know what I mean? Like, and it's lies. And it's like, yo, you weren't even there to actually be able to testify to it. So why are you even speaking on the matter?